before we jump
First,
into the presentation?
I would just like to say good afternoon and thank you so much for joining in. Hopefully this information will be valuable to you. Please feel free to ask any questions. There is no question that is, too small or too big or whatever. And if there is a question that you ask and I don't have an immediate answer for you, I will definitely get that information to you. Hopefully this will provide you with some good information that will help you with the growth of your company.
Fantastic. So with that, we are going to hop into our presentation. And just like common practice, you all will be receiving the presentation following today's session. If you do think of questions that you might not want to answer or ask in this particular form that maybe you think about it later on as well, we'll be collecting questions to send to Paris for answering as well. Again, it's a delight to be your facilitator. So I'll just begin with a quick overview as to why we decided to talk about this particular subject. As small business owners, we absolutely wear so many hats. When you think about all of the work that you have to get done and accomplish in a particular day, in a given week, we are looking at serving in multiple capacities in our companies, the same way divisions serve in companies. When we talk about too many hats, if I were to ask each and every one of you all, take a given day, how many hats do you wear? This is a breakout from one of our sources that we're using that kind of shows that it's not just a singular job when you are owner of a business. And as you can see, many of us perhaps wear more than 3 hats. So how productive can we be when we continue to operate across divisions with all of the different responsibilities that we have? When we're able to, when our finances dictate that we're able to and can accommodate, we really do need to look at what does building the people power of our companies look like, and that it happens through HR and through hiring. So with that, Paris, you want to go ahead and talk about how do you begin to determine whether or not you're ready to bring on help?
Okay, and that's really like a great question and even a great concept to think about, because I know a lot of times when we start our businesses, one of the first things that we're thinking about is, oh my gosh, I need help. Maybe I've taken on too much, or, I'm spread so thin. And initially as an entrepreneur, you're going to be spread thin. That part is just what it is. When you take the leap into the world of entrepreneurship, you are going to be spread thin. Just expect it. It is what it is. But you want to be careful, and you almost want to be methodical in how you decide and when you decide to take on a hire. Because please understand, when you decide to hire someone, it's an entirely different responsibility. And taking on that hire, not only do you have to have the money to pay them, but you also have to make sure that you have the funds available to pay your taxes. And the state of Kansas and the federal government, they want their money. And you have to make sure that once you say, okay, you know what, and for easy math, I'm going to pay this person $10 an hour. They're going to work 20 hours a week. Okay, that's $200 a week. And in your head, you're thinking, I got that. I can pay $200 a week. But are you thinking about the other things that come along with it? And then are you also thinking, oh my gosh, I got to pay workers' comp insurance. I got to pay these other things. So there's other financial responsibilities that come along with making the decision to hire. But then also the decision to hire, so say for instance, you are the owner of a business that's seasonal. So whether it's a lawn care industry, or say you're in a type of business that's more seasonal around holidays. And when I say holidays, I'm not necessarily, talking about the big ones, but like say you're a florist and the only time you're really busy is around the bigger holidays. Do you really need to hire someone for year round? Do you have enough business to sustain having a person on your payroll year round? And you have to think about those things. Because if you make the decision that, okay, I'm going to hire someone, I'm going to bring them on, and this is something that I know I'm ready for, and I know that I'm prepared for. Well, if there's a lull in business, and oftentimes what happens is, as an employer, we build relationships with our employees, and those relationships become personal, and that employee is often looked at as family, and then you don't want to let that person go, because now you're thinking about, well, how is their family going to eat, or they're a struggling college student, or I don't want to be the reason why they can't stay in school, or I don't want to be the reason why they can't feed their family, and it turns into a whole nother situation. So you have to ask yourself, realistically, is this a situation to where I really need to hire? And you actually have, and I'm going to say you have three options. You can bring someone on as a contractor, you can bring someone on as an employee, or you can even hire someone through a temp agency. And there are pros and cons to all of those. Obviously, if you hire someone on as an employee, you eat all the cost for that, but you also have all the control for that. So that's a benefit to that. If you bring someone on as a contractor, there are different roles and responsibilities if someone is a contractor. So if I, as a consultant, if I decide that I want to contract with another consultant and say, okay, I got this big project, I'm just going to hire this person as a contractor, I'm hiring them to do a specific project or a specific role. And I really don't have a lot of latitude to say, you know, I need you to be at the office at this time. I need you to do this. And I don't really get to govern them as an employee. Their responsibility is to complete the project. Yes, I have latitude over the project, but not necessarily over the person as an employee. But there are benefits to that, because once I pay them the set price and they're done, I'm done with that person. I send them a 1099 at the end of the year, and I don't have to pay their taxes. They're responsible for their own taxes. I can go through a temp agency, and the temp agency is going to do everything. They're going to hire the person. They're going to interview the person. They're going to hire the person. They're going to do everything. Now, I'm going to pay a higher price for that person because the employment agency is going to take care of everything. They're going to pay the taxes. They're going to pay everything. If this person gets hurt, it's on the employment agency. If I decide that I don't need this person anymore, the unemployment is going to come off the employment agency. There's nothing on me as an employer. So there's multiple benefits to also using an employment agency, but it's going to cost you more.
I appreciate that rundown and the differences between the types of employees. Just off the top, it's always a question of the chicken and the egg. Yes, you have a need, but do you start with the job description, or do you start with the type of employee type that you would want to bring on? Do you have any advice between the two?
I would say that you would always, start with the position description or the project description. And the reason why I say that is a lot of times it's a project. It's not necessarily a position, it's a project. And so you have to sit down and make the decision between, is it a project? Is it a to and few? If it's one of those things that you're going to do maybe here and there, or you're going to do this one-time thing and it doesn't necessarily justify you having someone part-time or full-time in that role. So it's going to start out either as a project description or a position description. Then you take those and then you think about, okay, do I want to, when you get the project description or the position description, then you make the determination of, okay, so now I need to figure out which way I want to go with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And just as you indicated in the information you provided on the slide, then you begin to look at these kind of probing questions. Is it an immediate need or a temporary need, a long-term need? Who would manage the role? What is the budget for this position? And just the other items that are on this particular slide.
Right. And then when you ask yourself who would manage the role, because in all three areas, you have to ask yourself who is going to manage the role, because the role still has to be managed. Even if it's a project, it still has to be managed. Even if it's someone that's hired through a temp agency, they still have to be managed. Who's going to manage the role? Who has the bandwidth to manage the role? What is the budget for the position? And that's the important part in really figuring out what type of position it's going to be. What's the budget? And then what is the budget for recruiting? And one thing a lot of people really, really don't think about, recruiting can be very expensive. It can be inexpensive as well. There are free resources out there as far as recruiting is concerned. But I will also tell you that literally you get what you pay for when it comes to recruiting. Are your employer tax accounts set up? You have to have your unemployment insurance tax account set up. You have to have your state tax account set up, because you have to pay taxes on behalf of this employee. Do you have your onboarding documents set up? So these are things that you have to think about before you go on to just say, I'm going to hire somebody. You can't give them a piece of big chief tablet paper and say, fill out this application.
That's good. That's good. So as we dive deeper, and I appreciate you giving us that overview, let's go to what you say we start with, the job description or the project description. Walk us through what that looks like.
And so when you, just like, I'm going to move this over, move my thing over a little bit. And so as I was talking about a little bit, as far as determining if the position is contract, part-time, full-time, as far as the position being a contract position or an actual employee W-2 based position, the IRS has guidelines that can help small business owners determine the difference. And a lot of times, thank goodness for Google, because you can almost Google anything and find out what's out there to help you. So as I said earlier, there are facts that provide evidence of the degree of control and the independence of those categories. So behavioral, does the company control or have the right to control what the worker does and how the worker does his or her job? As a contractor, a lot of times the contractor is coming in to do a specific thing. They're working on a project. They're working to help the company get something done. And it could be, they're working in a specific capacity. It's not like they're coming in, they have to be in at 8 because they have to start answering the phones at 8:15, or they're not necessarily punching a clock like a typical employee would be doing. You have to look at the financial aspects of it as well. How the contractor is paid, what is provided by the actual company, and what is actually provided by the contractor. There are certain things when you start looking at project work, the contractor will provide certain things themselves because those things are figured into the contractor's price. But then in different aspects as an employee, there are, I guess you could say, tools of the job or tools of the trade that's going to be provided by the employee. So when you go to work at your office, you know that your employer is going to have certain things there that's going to aid you in doing your job on a daily basis. Whereas as a contractor, that's not necessarily so, because it's an assumption that whatever supplies and tools and things that's required for the project, that the contractor is going to build that into the price. Mm-hmm. And then what type of a relationship is it? What is the written contract? What does that say? So with an employee, we have an expectation, not necessarily a guarantee, but we have an expectation of vacation, pension plans, insurance, all of that kind of stuff. And whereas with a contractor, That's not guaranteed. You're going to go in and you're going to do the job, and that's it. There's no guarantee of continued employment. And then we also know that there is a difference between a part-time and a full-time employee. The level of benefits that a full-time employee receives and a part-time employee receives is totally different.
It's fantastic. It's a lot. It's a lot to go into the decision to hire. So we appreciate you taking us through the details of that as well. Remember, everyone, if you do have questions, feel free to chat those and we'll make sure to get those answered too. So talk about what are the actual details that should go into a good job description. And there might be some things that cannot go into a good job description. Take us through this, Paris.
Well, and for a job description, you have to be very careful with your verbiage as far as a job description is concerned. So you don't want to, put anything in it that is, that has any type of gender bias or anything in there, or any type of racial or cultural bias or anything like that in a job description. So like you can't say that a particular type of work is women's work or men's work or anything like that. You just write the job description, and whoever applies. But you have to be very careful that when you write a job description, it is in plain language. It explains the task and the duties and the functions and the responsibilities of the job. And you also want to make sure that it includes any physical and mental demands of the position also. And the reason,
go ahead.
And the reason being is that a lot of times companies will say, say for instance, a general labor position. So they'll write a general labor position and they'll say, well, all this position does is, is this, this position just includes, picking up debris after a construction job. Okay, but what does picking up debris means? What is debris? Because debris to me is a Kleenex. I can do that. I can pick up a couple pieces of paper, maybe a trash bag here and there. So I'm gonna sign up for that job. I can do that. But what picking up debris may really mean is I may need to really be able to lift 50 pounds by myself. I may have to be able to stand and be on my feet all day. Those are the kind of things that need to be in the job description. If it's a position to where I'm going to be exposed to outdoors a majority of my shift, that needs to be in the position description. What type of environment am I going to be in? And I actually do have a question real quick from Cynthia. Mm-hmm. Hold on, let me address that. Cynthia's question is, if we need a specific gender for a specific job, how would that be worded? So here's the thing. If you need a specific gender for a specific type of position, you have to be very careful in why you need that position to be a specific gender. And it needs to be clear in the job description why you need that specific gender. So for instance, if this is a position working with young ladies, say young ladies overnight in some type of a group home or something like that, that needs to be stated that that's what the position entails. That's what the environment entails, that you're staying all night in a group home environment, and the clientele is this age to this age, and in this position this is what's required for the position. So if it's a situation to where there's a specific need for the role to be gender specific, it has to be detailed as to why that specific gender is required. Because if if someone was to say or was to prove that that job can be done by someone of the opposite sex, that's just a lawsuit waiting to happen. So as long as there is a way that you can justify that, hey, this is what this role does, and this is why this particular position needs to be filled by a woman or by a man. But I will tell you that, well, if you pay, let's see, what about hiring and paying interns or volunteers? Well, if you pay a volunteer, they're not a volunteer. So the term volunteer is just that, is if they're volunteering, they're not going to receive payment. And paying interns would depend on how you have your internship program set up. So if you have your internship program set up to pay, you are more than welcome to pay it. You can either pay a set hourly wage, and if you do pay a set hourly wage, it needs to be at least minimum wage, or you can pay like a stipend of a set amount. And if you have your internship like tied through college to through a intern's school or whatever, they can possibly receive college credit depending on what classes they are taking, and then you can do it that way as well. And I would have to say internships, I would say more or less, most internships are paid, but I would say it's probably about 65-35 as far as if an internship is paid as opposed to unpaid.
Mm-hmm.
And Nicole Williams asks, does hiring for an internship fall in the same category of hiring for an hourly employee? I would need you to be a little bit more specific about that answer, because you can be a little bit more specific in an internship when you're hiring for an intern, because you want someone who is in a specific degree program. So what you're looking for in an internship program, and I actually build internship programs as well. So if you want to talk a little bit more about this offline, we can. But it's still a non-discriminatory type situation. So the one thing about internships, you can look for a certain type of student that's in a certain type of program or in a certain field of study. But depending on if your program is going to be paid or unpaid, that's going to kind of be the caveat in the field of study on, how you do the internship. So that's going to be it. And there is still some governance from the IRS on how your internship program should run, as far as what you're having interns do.
It's fantastic. I'm glad you guys are getting your questions in. We'll continue to chat through and then continue to push forward with what else to avoid or be mindful of when it comes to considering growing your team. So pitfalls to avoid.
Do not hire your family members and your friends. Just because they're your friends and your family members, that does not mean that they're going to make good employees. Just because y'all make really good spades and dominoes and bingo partners, and y'all make really good cookies together and stuff like that, it does not mean that y'all can work together. Don't hire before you're ready. Do not let people hype you up into making a move that you're not ready to into making a move that you're not ready to make. Make sure that when you are ready to hire, you know that you're ready to hire. You know that you have the revenue available. You know that you're ready to pull that trigger. Because if you start filing your report, your earning reports late, especially the state of Kansas will come after you, and they don't care how small your business is. They will come and they will get their money. Make sure that if you really need to hire, that you hire, whether it's a part-time position, and understand that you can hire in a part-time role. Don't feel like you have to hire and say, oh my gosh, I hired her to work part-time 9 to 1. You can have flexibility in how you hire. Maybe now you need to change your hours to be 11 to 3. But if you need to hire, hire. All accountants don't do payroll taxes. And I will say this again. All accountants don't do payroll taxes. Say this with me. All accountants don't do payroll taxes. And so what I mean by that, you may be ready to hire and you're thinking that your accountant is going to take care of all of that. They may not. So when you are ready to hire, you have to make sure it is your responsibility as the business owner to make sure that your payroll tax accounts are set up. Make sure you understand the roles of your organization, however many people that is. If it's 1 person, 2 person, 3 person, if you have a board, whatever, make sure you understand the roles of your organizations. Make sure you know how to vet the applicants. Make sure you know how to look at applicants and say, this is someone I would like to talk to. Every person that you interview should not give you the warm fuzzies. If you get 20 applicants and you say you want to talk to 15 of them, we need to have a conversation. Because there's no way that 15 applicants out of 20 should have made it to the finish line. And you have to know how to interview qualified candidates. You have to know. And I say one of the best ways to do this is to have set questions. And I believe behavior-based questions are the best. Have set questions that you ask every candidate.
Give an example of what you just said about behavior-based questions, please.
Tell me about it. So for behavior-based questions, there's always this thing is when they say, tell me about a time. So what they're doing is they're asking you to tell me about a time when you disagreed with your supervisor and what was the outcome. And so, and believe it or not, the great thing about behavior-based interview questions is behavior-based interview questions is not designed for you to be a rock star every time. Behavior-based interview questions are designed for you to give examples where you had areas of opportunity in somehow, some way, you were able to still figure out how to work through it. Or tell me about a time when you provided outstanding customer service. That's what a behavior-based interview question looks like.
Thank you. So then you've spent some time determining what type of help you want to bring aboard. You've got your position description, job description. Now you need to promote this job opening. What are some recommendations you have for that?
Post on free job boards. There are free job boards out there. You have to do some Google searching. One of the best job boards that we have out there available to us, believe it or not, is Kansas Work, is affiliated with Kansas Works. The thing about it though is you have to do the work. You have to get registered with the organization, with Kansas Works. They'll post your jobs. You can search resumes. You can do all of that. advertise your position on social media, and make sure you have people that will share your post. And I actually have a couple people that whenever they post jobs, I always share their job search, their post as far as the type of position that they're looking for. Post on your website. And even if you post it on your website, make sure that from posting it on your website, you also share your website post on your social media as well. And request employee referrals. To me, the best way to get qualified employees is to request employee referrals. Now, if you don't have an employee, that's a whole nother story. But also, we have some great avenues here locally to, get positions out here. Believe it or not, a lot of churches will let you post in their bulletin. It's just a matter of getting the information to them in a timely manner. So take advantage of those things. I will tell you, Indeed is a good place for posting jobs, but Indeed can be costly, especially if you have to post a lot of jobs, or if you don't pay attention to the $20 a day that it can cost, and then you forget that you had that job out there for 45 days. So Indeed is good, but it can be costly as well. And Career Builder and Monster is still out there. It's just that people don't use them as frequently as they do Indeed. Eric's Jobs is out there. I've never used Eric's Jobs personally. And also look at your different trade websites, and, different Facebook areas and things like that. Because, like, for instance, for me, since I'm affiliated with Human Resources, our Society for Human Resource Management, or SHRM, we have a whole website where people can post jobs and things like that. So if you have an industry website or an industry Facebook page or something like that, look into it.
All great advice. And then when people begin responding to the job post, just some really high level tips for conducting that interview. You mentioned one about having your questions prepared. You mentioned, asking behavior-based questions. Anything else about conducting a skillful interview, or even having a screening process that you'd want to share here?
Have a screening, definitely have a screening process. And I would say, I don't want to avoid, the pandemic that we're in right now. But also take advantage of using things like Zoom or Google Hangout or whatever, because there's more than one way to skin a cat. So I work remotely. I am an HR director for a government contractor here in Wichita, Kansas. And so all of my interviews are conducted remotely. And so when I interview folks, it's oftentimes a phone interview and a video conferencing interview. And so most of the time I have on a blazer and a white dress shirt and shorts because they can never see me, from the waist down anyway. But take advantage of those other opportunities as far as being able to interview your candidates and things like that. And to be honest with you, don't be afraid to interview again. Like, if you have 2 or 3 candidates and you're like, you know what, I hate to ask them, I hate to put them through another round of interviews, but follow your gut every time. Follow your gut. And don't be afraid to say, like, so say for instance, you're hiring for a marketing position and you have these last 2 candidates and you're like, I really like them, but I don't know how to pick. Give them a project. Give them something to do. Give them something to where you can see their work, to where you can see what they will be able to really bring to your organization. Whether it's, creating a brand something or doing a marketing pitch or something like that.
That's wonderful. And again, we're spending this this session talking about the onboarding process, you want to do these things and do these things well, so that if you have to remove folks, which is not in this session, it's a whole session in and of itself, that it will be easier to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. And so as we're talking about onboarding and bringing someone onto your organization, you want to make sure as you are bringing someone on that you're not breaking any wage, labor, or anti-discrimination laws. So for all of your positions, unless you're doing an internship and you're going to pay a student a stipend, you have to pay them at least minimum wage. So that's out the gate. You want to make sure you're not breaking labor laws. You're not breaking child labor laws. You want to make sure you have your labor posters posted. You want to have a clear process for making an offer. In your offer letter, you want to make sure any benefits that you're going to offer is included in that letter. That you have a clear process for hiring candidates. That your onboarding process and the schedule you have is sufficient to complete the entire process, and that the candidate is aware of what is going on and what they're doing every step of the way. And then you want to make sure you're reporting your new hires to the Kansas Department of Labor. And then, oh, is this the second one? Okay, I'm sitting up here looking. Mm-hmm. And then make sure you define what you want your company culture to be. And so as you're getting ready for all this, and these are some of the things that should have happened really kind of in your business plan, like process some of it. So define what you want your company culture to be. You know, your mission, your vision, your values, rate your culture. What, if you had to sit down and look at your company culture, if you had to ask yourself, is this a good workplace culture? If I had to work here, if I was working here and I had to rate my own company culture, how would I rate it? If you looked at your favorite company cultures and your worst company cultures that you work for, how would this company rate? And take the necessary steps to establish that culture that you want. And understand that establishing a good company culture does not mean doing everything that's fun. Having a good company culture also means having values and having rules and having policies and procedures. As the leader, you have to take the necessary steps to establish the culture that you want in your company. Does it make sense? Is it affordable? And how do I embrace the differences in others? Celebrating company success and employee success is very, very important, especially in today's time. People don't stay at companies as long as they used to. Back, even like when my parents were working, 30, 40 years, that doesn't seem to happen as much as it used to. But you need to make sure that you are developing and building the company culture that you want. And I do have a question. Do we have to report contractors to the Department of Labor as well? Meaning independent contractors, if you hire contractors for your company. I'm looking. You know what? I have to be honest. I don't know the answer to that question because I've never known anyone to report contractors to the Department of Labor, but I will find the answer to that question and get back with you, Erin.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know the reporting function that we most often think about is with the taxes. If you're paying independent contractors more than $600 or more, then you need to be filling out a, oh goodness, what is it?
You have to 1099.
1099, thank you.
1099 them. You will 1099 them. Mm-hmm. But as far as reporting them, because so the purpose of reporting your employees is for tax purposes. Mm-hmm. And so that's the sole purpose of that for the Kansas Department of Labor. And so I don't know that, but I will look that information up and get your email address from Christina, and I'll send you an email with an answer.
That's a great question. Okay. So again, once you have hired, brought them in, established a workplace culture, we're rounding out towards the close of our presentation, but we didn't want to close it without talking about being a great manager. Paris, in my own experience, has made sure that as much as we talk about the good candidates and the good job descriptions, making sure it's a good fit manager to employee as well. And so I wanted to make sure to throw this in here as well about understanding what type of management style that you possess, and understanding what that means in terms of your contribution to setting workplace culture and expectations as well.
Well, and one thing that I will say, and I say this from a good place, of course. A lot of our best entrepreneurs are horrible managers. A lot of our best entrepreneurs, they have the business sense, they have the get up and go, they have the best ideas, but when it comes to managing people, they don't manage people well. And it's not a bad thing that they don't manage people well. It's just that people aren't their thing. You know, they're used to people being able to, if I give you something to do, I need you to do it. I don't want to have to micromanage you. I don't want to have to constantly check in with you and ask you if you're doing what you're doing, because I totally trust you to be an adult and do what you say you're going to do. But managing, and I'm just going to let you guys kind of look at the 6 types of management styles while I'm talking or whatever. But I have problems with the word management anyway. And the reason why I say that I have problems with the word management is because oftentimes people are placed in management positions and they're not management. They're not management material. I like the word leader. And the reason why I like the word leader is because if you lead, if you're the right type of leader, and a leader is a person who's constantly working on themselves as well as working on their team. A leader is someone who can be followed. A manager is just someone who's first in line. It's like when we were in kindergarten or in first grade, you always had that one classmate that 5 minutes before the whistle was blown, they standing in line because they wanted to be first in line. Like, to me, that's what a manager is. A manager is first in line. But a leader is someone who can and who will be followed. And so you have to understand what your leadership style is. You have to learn and understand how to coach and develop your team, and understand that your team is going to have different leadership needs. So you might have some that you have to micromanage, and you might have some that you don't have to micromanage. And don't penalize everyone for the flaws of a few.
There you go.
And if you don't know how to lead, you need to get up under a mentor and figure out what that looks like. You need to take some leadership classes, read some leadership books, but understand what it was that you liked in those great leaders that you had in your life, and figure out how to start developing those skills within yourself, especially if you see longevity in you being a business owner. No one wants to no one wants to be up under a dictator. Nobody wants to be up under a micromanager. And if you have to micromanage people, those are not the people that you need on your team. You are the face of your organization. You should be able to be out and about being that face and getting more business and developing your business. And if you are with people that you have to hold their hand and you have to tell them everything to do, those are the wrong people for you.
Good. That's good. That's almost a mic drop.
Yeah, I needed that one right there.
Bam!
Yeah, that's real. Well, We have just a couple of minutes left. And again, you know, we start on time, we value your time. So were there any other questions that we can just go ahead and throw out to Paris? You covered a lot. You covered a lot. We'll follow up with examples. Paris has been really great about providing like examples of job descriptions and agreements, things of that nature. So I'll include that in the follow-up email. But if you want to reach out to Paris directly, her contact information is included on the presentation, and I'll make sure to include it in the follow-up message as well. As always, we want to make sure that you evaluate the content and also the presentation of it as we continue to move forward in our how-to series. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about marketing, how to build a marketing plan, and we will have 2 guest experts in addition to myself. We will have Claudia Amaro from ABC Bilingual Resources, who is a social media, bilingual social media agency in Wichita, and then we will have Keith Richardson of Houston, Texas, who's an Instagram phenom, to come on and kind of give us some social media tips and advice. But as for today, I want to thank Paris for sharing with us so deeply and so plainly. We appreciate that so much.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks to everyone
bye-bye.
who joined us. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.